Welcome back to another exciting episode of In the Stacks by the Sea. I'm your host, Dan Turner, and we're here at the Waccamaw Library in beautiful Pawleys Island, South Carolina, and we're switching it up. We're actually beyond the stacks in the big backyard. This is where we're fixing up the backyard here with our helps from the Friends of the Waccamaw Library, and you can see we're still in process, but it's starting to look real nice. We got our fountain going behind us, and it's very appropriate. We have a special guest with us, one of the most prominent environmental writers of the Southern Ecology, John Lane, with us here, founding director of the Goodall Center of Environmental Studies at Wofford College, and a writer who's produced over a dozen books. Take a long time to mention them, but we have a smorgasbord, a selection right here of, a few of those titles. But so it's very appropriate. We're not inside but outdoors, because that's where John spends most of his time, out adventuring, getting out in it, and then writing about it. And you feel like you're out in it with him when you're reading his books. So John just visited us, gave a great talk about neighborhood hawks, one of his most recent titles, but also a lot of other things about writing and the ecology. So John, great to have you here.
Thanks, Dan. I'm really hoping that one of your neighborhood hawks will swoop in while we're out here and at least start making that great red-shouldered hawk noise that we're so used to. I heard them when I first arrived today.
Yeah, you're like the hawk whisperer.
I'm the hawk whisperer, yeah.
We've got, and we certainly have plenty of squirrels around here that they might be interested.
I have to yell at the squirrels. I can't whisper to them.
No, so that was, a wonderful session we just had, and people loved it. And you go around, not just the state, you're all around the region, kind of barnstorming for books, for writing, but also very much for nature, I guess you'd say, for the ecology and the environment. That's one of your main passions. So we appreciate you stopping here. And why do you think that drives you so much?
Well, that's a hard question, because I've been writing about my childhood a lot recently for a book that I'm working on that kind of intercuts science about soils in the Piedmont and memories from my childhood. And so one of the things I've been doing is kind of trying to push back further and further and ask that question of why it is so important to me to be out in it. And I hadn't really come to an answer yet. I can sort of track it back to childhood, but I love to get out, and I love to romp along streams, but I'm not sure what motivated it. What was that turn that took me from the inside to the outside? I know it's there, though.
Yeah. And it is, that's kind of your MO as a writer too. You talked about the eye, the inside voice. It wouldn't be all that interesting, though, if it's just, if you had 12 books just about me, me.
Right.
It's not just John Lane. You're a real presence there. It is in the first person voice, but you're connecting with the reader. It's about the adventure. It's about the experience that you're sharing.
I'm more like a guide. I like to think of myself as a literary voice that guides you through a landscape that really matters to me. And that's that particularly, I've written about the coast, obviously. I've written about the mountains. But for me, home base is the Piedmont. Home base are those hills above Columbia, between the mountains and the fall line, that I've written about over and over. That's where Neighborhood Hawks takes place. That's where I depart from in my paddle to the sea. That's where I put the plate on the map and draw a circle around it and circling home. That's where the river runs that the Chattooga was written about. That's where I started looking for the coyotes. So every book starts in that Piedmont.
Yeah. And when you said that you're kind of a guide to the landscape, that there's a Robert Frost line where he says he's a guide who only has at heart you're getting lost. And would you say that's something you?
I wonder I wonder how much my work is about the getting lost. I guess somebody would have to read it in total and ask that question. For me, I almost always have a destination. So I think the lost part of it's not quite as big a deal for me.
But you don't have.
I might make other
answers.
people, I might
yes.
take people to places they're not comfortable.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've thought about a lot is most of my books, I'm pretty comfortable. For me to write about, say, the Upper East Side of New York, I might get lost up there, but I'm not lost when I go into a swamp usually.
You definitely know the terrain
Yes.
intimately, and it's we feel very confident in your ability to guide us, but you do you make us a little bit, you unsettle us. You get us out there with you, and so I think we feel a little lost. There are no
particularly with
easy
the types of
answers.
animals that I put us in contact with.
Coyotes,
alligators, rattlesnakes.
Rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
They're not, they're not warm and fuzzy animals.
No.
Even the hawks are powerful, but there's a distance there.
Yeah. I never thought about that, but
So
I think so. I think more than anything, I write love songs, to landscape. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you're, and it was something your wife Betsy Teeter, who's a major presence up in that Piedmont area, cultural, kind of an icon up there. With you, helped found the Hub City Writers Project, which has been a huge cultural force. But she said to you one day, "Why does your heart go out so fully to wild things?
Yes,
like the hawks, the coyotes, the rivers,
wild places, wild things."
What? And so you may not have a full.
I don't have a full answer, Dan,
Yeah.
and I really got nailed at a presentation about this book up in Virginia a couple of months ago, because somebody asked me in a conversation like this that very question, and I did not come up with a good answer. I feel like that one passage that I read here comes closest to it, but I still didn't even say it there. I don't know why. I'm biophilia, E.O. Wilson's term. I'm a lover of all things biological and wild.
And there is a real, there's been a change scientifically in how we view non-human creatures, that they're not just mechanical objects anymore. They have consciousness, that much wider sense of consciousness than we ever imagined.
What's happened now is we look at, the enlightened, I think, look at animals as one continuum, and we happen to be on that continuum. But there's nothing, I happen to believe this, and I know there are people who don't, and I understand if there are differences in faith and things, but I believe that there's nothing about being human that there's not some trace of in other animals, that we do not have anything special about us. We just have it in larger quantities, the same way that these birds have eyesight like we can't imagine. They got the eyesight, we got the consciousness, the big consciousness, but it's not something special in us. It's just developed because of our evolutionary path more than in them.
So it makes sense to have that.
We got Harris Tweed.
That's true, yes. We're all tweeted up today.
And iPhones, and but elephants got something different.
Yeah. So there's beauty and ability in all of these creatures.
Yes.
And so that kind of binds us together and raises empathy. You talked about.
It should. I understand how it might not. Fear has a lot to do with it, but it should raise empathy.
Yeah. Well, and you've talked about you traveled throughout the region, but also in this home state. And
Yeah.
this beautiful book. You've been down in this region a lot. You paddled from your backyard all the way down the river system of South
Came out
Carolina,
there in the Santee Delta.
In the Santee Delta, and you made trips over several years to come back and revisit the Santee Delta, and you put together this wonderful book, beautiful, with kind of local hero Phil Wilkinson, the Gator Man.
Yeah, yeah.
We can call you the Hawk Man, I guess now.
Not in the way Phil's the Gator Man. No.
He's the Gator Whisperer.
Yeah.
But he's something else. But you collaborated together with words and images, and what's just a beautiful book.
Well, when I paddled from Spartanburg to the ocean, I came out in the South Santee, and at that point I knew Phil, but I wasn't a close friend. So he's not in my Paddle to Sea.
Right.
But when I started working about 7 years ago on the Coyote book, I'd gotten to know Phil better, and I wanted one of the chapters to be about Phil. And so I came down here, and we went on to Yawkey, and we talked about coyotes on Yawkey, and we had this great moment in that chapter about him where we're on the beach, and we find tracks of two coyotes that have been kind of running and moving, and we kind of reconstructed that moment, that beautiful moment on the beach of these coyotes playing on the beach, and that made it into the chapter. And it was then that I started thinking about Phil's work with alligators, and so I started making a series of trips down here. I made about a dozen, where I went out into the field with Phil to write these chapters about him that I knew were going to be a single narrative. And I wanted the book to be called Field Notes, F-I-E-L-D, but also P-H-I-L-D,
Yes.
Field Notes. But thank goodness the editor at Evening Post Books realized that 7 days on the Santee Delta would sell more books. So, but anyway, I created this narrative, and we're actually going to launch it tonight in Georgetown at a special party at one of the plantations up there.
Yeah, it should be a wonderful, wonderful event, and very deserving. And Phil is the spouse of Libby Bernadine, who's wonderful, a poet, and runs the Tea and Poetry series here. So they're a great cultural couple down here, just like you and Betsy up in Spartanburg. So,
They really are.
And you know that Piedmont territory up in upstate South Carolina intimately, and that's an amazing. The detail with which you record that landscape is incredible, and the attentiveness. You read this poem about a creature we don't like to cuddle up with ever, most of us, but you don't mind. You want to get close to that sizzling wildness, as you put it.
Yeah.
You mind?
Should I read
that
it?
one? Let's get it on. This will be a cleaner copy.
Yeah. I was lucky to be asked to be in this wonderful book that just came out from the University of Georgia Press. The University of Georgia Press has been so good to me. I've had 6 or 7 full-length narratives with them. I've published one book of essays, and I've done a number of pieces for other books they've done, and this is one of them. This is a book called The Literary Field Guide to Southern Appalachia, and there's a natural history piece, and then there's a poem by a number of poets. And mine I chose to do was The Timber Rattlesnake. Crotalus horridus. When I need relief from being only human, I meander upslope, scout the stone lookout tower, edged with brittle morning sun, and conjure a rattler's bright coils. It's an old presence I feel there, with every step into laurel slicks or onto vague trail verges. On the mountain, the ground itself is shot through with native venom. Rattlesnake plantain grows too thin to hide sunning buzzworms. It takes Galax for that. especially along the ledge trail where they sometimes den with copperheads. Darkness runs deep in those forgotten shadow caves. Old timers say the devil himself twisted slumbering pairs of black-tailed timbers to forge the gates of hell. In their presence I seek salvation, a blessing. I look behind rotting hemlock logs, stepped across not out of fear, but knowledge one might linger there in supplication, and once sighted, anoint me with its sizzling wildness.
Yeah.
Sizzling wildness is not something most people go looking for.
No, not at all. And you mentioned the poet, he's resting eternally around the corner in the All Saints Cemetery.
Yeah, James Dickey, one of my heroes.
And although you don't want to merge, he wrote some poems and some fiction about merging, becoming, entering the animal mind or the body.
I want to observe. I want to celebrate. I want to maybe worship, but not merge.
You even had that religious language there, but there's a distance, as you said. You have tremendous empathy, but you recognize that there's a rattlesnakeness to the rattlesnake and a hawkness to the hawk,
and a meanness to me.
Yeah, and that's something else. You present humans as different, as other, as well, and which is another way I think we get a little lost. You're a guide who only has at heart us getting lost. In your stories, it makes us a little uncomfortable because we start to feel on the outside a little bit, but it's good for us to see ourselves.
I mentioned in the talk a little while ago, the conversation, that I once read this, and a Baptist minister came up to me afterwards and really argued with me about this phrase of David Abrams that I use, the more than human world. It's a struggle for some folks to get there because of their faith. Yeah, it's important for humans to be human. For a lot of people in the world.
And that's, looking at a writer like Robinson Jeffers,
more like Dickey.
Yeah.
Somebody who wanted to leave the human world.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes out of unhappiness. Jeffers struggled with the social world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that humans did, Jeffers was looking
World
at this.
War II.
Yeah, pretty bloody and pretty awful.
Yeah.
We
he
don't have the best record.
Widely disparaged because of his stand on World War II.
Yeah. So, I think Mark Twain said, human beings are the only animal that blushes or needs to. Was the rejoinder there.
Yeah.
So we don't have the best record necessarily, but
we're working on it though. I hope.
Yeah. We do some good things too, but so you're talking about you do have a lot about the outside world. To talk a little bit, you do have this book, The Father Box.
Yeah.
You have. You said you're turning more towards your own past, your own childhood, your own history.
Yeah, this is actually, I'll hold this up.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful book that was published by Horse and Buggy Press up in Durham, Dave Wofford's press. And he'd done an earlier book of mine called The Dead Father Poems.
Right.
And I decided that I was going to do one more on my father material. I had a box that my father's stuff ended up in, all the material objects of my father's life that I retained, and it's really an interesting exercise to think about, if your parents have passed, what do you actually have of the material world they lived in? And I had a whole box full of stuff: his flag that draped over his coffin when he died, souvenirs he brought back from World War II, photographs, letters, all this stuff, his driver's license, his Social Security card. And when he turned 100, when he would have turned 100. He died in 1959, but in 2015, when he turned 100, would have turned 100, I started reaching in that box and writing these prose poems about the objects in the box. And I took the box and gave it to a friend of mine who's a fabulous photographer up at Virginia Tech, Rob McDonald. And I said, Rob, you re-photograph the items in the box. And he did these remarkable photographs of various objects from the box. And I'm really I'm trying to do this book now that sort of focuses on my mother, memories of my mother, that's going to be a full prose book rather than a chapbook like this, and we'll see where that goes. So families become very important. And the reason I did it with my mother, one reason is because somebody at one of the readings said, so have you ever done the same thing for your mother? And I've written a lot of poems about my mother, but I've never done that. So that's one of the things I'm doing, trying to sort through her life and my life and our lives together.
Yeah. Well, and Rob McDonald, a native South Carolinian from Marion, right?
Yes.
Yes. So he's another one.
Fabulous photographer.
Wonderful. I know he went around taking pictures of objects associated with authors, like I think the braces Flannery O'Connor wore.
He's trying to visit as many houses as he can.
And houses of authors, really.
I'm going to try to get him to work with me on this prose book too. I've got an idea of him going and, at least one essay, sort of taking photographs that speak to the essay.
Yeah. Well, we would, I guess, as a way to kind of, and you don't have an answer, which I think is fine for the wildness and the connection, but you did talk in Neighborhood Hawks about building a kind of commensal relationship, and that model. Could you say something about that as maybe as a possibility of a hopeful way forward with all the environmental issues we're having?
I discovered this idea of the commensal relationship and with animals, and it made me start thinking of asking the question. So I know what I get from them. I get to watch them, I get to write about them, but what do they get from me? And I realized that it's a terrible time we live in, and we're in a time of crisis, and there are going to be a lot of animals that don't make it out of this crisis, but there are going to be a lot of animals who do okay. And one reason is because they've learned how to live in close proximity to us, and many hawks are like that. And these hawks, our yards have actually made their lives easier, and so they do get things from us. And so this title even of the book, Neighborhood Hawks, they're neighbors of ours, and I play around with that all the way through the book.
Yeah. So we can kind of work together and benefit without harming.
Back and forth.
And that's
not true, not clear entirely who gets the best of it.
Yeah.
But I obviously for a year got the best of it. They're not getting none of my royalties. But I am feeding the birds at the bird feeder. So
very good. And I love this. This is one of my favorite books in terms of the look of it.
The covers are remarkable. When they came to me, I don't have. Let's see. I might have a. No, but most of the Georgia books have been driven by a photograph on the cover. And I was kind of thinking they'd do the same thing with this one. They'd put a photograph, kind of like this. I think I've got it here. Yeah, a photograph kind of like that on the cover. This is by a friend of mine up in Spartanburg. That's the hawk that I write about. So I thought, Neighborhood Hawks, and then this noble picture of this. And then they came back and they found this wonderful tattoo woodblock artist in Athens, Georgia, named David Hale. And they said, how would you feel about this? And I said, let's do it. And they gave him the book, and he read it, and he came up with this amazing cover.
Yeah.
Or cover illustration.
That's great. If you get a tattoo, that's it.
If you're a tattoo person, that's the one you should do.
Yeah. Well, John, we really appreciate having you here, and definitely want to have you back.
Hope I
maybe-
can get back for 7 days
would
and
love
get
that.
Phil and I talking about this book. That'd
Yes,
be great.
and
Thank
talking-
you, Dan.
Meeting some Gators who are
Yeah.
named out there, introducing us, and any words of wisdom for the good of the order as we.
I would say pay attention. Pay attention. That's taken me a long way.
Yes, and as we mentioned, you mean that you're very attentive to all the details of the natural world, but you mean it on a deeper level
Yes.
too, on a very sort of a Zen-like level.
Yes.
That
Yes.
be attentive from dawn to dusk, and
Yep.
surprise what you may find.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
Very good, John. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. We love
really great.
love you and love having you.
Thanks to everybody.
And goodbye from In the Stacks by the Sea.
Come inside.